Call the meeting of the Richmond Heights Charter Review Committee for April the 8th, 2014 to order. Can we have everyone to stand to pledge allegiance to the flag?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. We have the roll call.
Danielle Cadu.
Here.
Stephanie Douglas. Here. Dwayne Clarkson.
Here.
Tyrone Drummer.
Here.
Donald Houston.
Here.
Elliot Eisenberg.
Here.
Stanley Josselson. Shadina Williams. Here. Arnetta Parker. Here.
Secretary, can you read the minutes from our last meeting today for the first?
Meeting minutes of Tuesday, April 1st. Roll call excused was Dwayne Clarkson and Arnetta Parker. The meeting was open at 6:05 p.m. with the Pledge of Allegiance. The minutes were read from the previous week's meeting. Stanley Josselson moved that the minutes be approved as read. Donald Houston second. The vote passed unanimously. Stephanie Douglas moved that Dwayne Clarkson and Arnetta Parker be excused from this evening's meeting. Stanley Josselson second. The vote passed unanimously. Service Director Mr. Lazar was present for his presentation to the committee. He informed the committee that he will be retiring in June with 52 and a half years of public service. That he came to Richmond Heights in 1990. He stated that he feels it is necessary to see that the department is in stable condition before his departure. Daniel Cadu asked if he had any suggestions for possible changes to the charter, and he stated no. Stanley Josselson asked his opinion on whether council should have a say in the release of an employee along with the mayor. His thought was that it should stay the same. One person should not have the ability to terminate an employee. Elliot Eisenberg asked what kind of support is available to you. His response, he has an employee with 30 years experience and believes that he would be a good foreman. However, he does not feel that a person in control should be in the union. He further stated that he has made a choice of who he thinks should be the foreman and is willing to sit down with the mayor to discuss his replacement. Mr. Lazar also stated that council has been around for a long time and that times change, things change, and there should be room to bring in new ideas. Donald Houston asked if Mr. Lazar thought the employee with 30 years experience might be better qualified, obviously with the background and dedication, and again Mr. Lazar stated that he is uncomfortable putting a union member in as foreman. It would be difficult for someone to discipline someone with whom he is well versed in negotiating and collective bargaining. Todd Hunt stated that the removal of a foreman from the union cannot be accomplished by charter, that a foreman can be removed only from a union by way of bargaining. He also stated that there are a lot of duties for the service director and that his help comes from many different areas, including the city engineer and the building director. Because of previous information that was disseminated by Danielle Cadu, the chair thought it more feasible to assign each member a section of the charter to focus on, dissect, and analyze, and then bring their thoughts to the entire group. He passed out the assigned sections, a true and exact copy attached to and made a part of permanent minutes. Stanley Josselson suggested that rather than start at the beginning based on the new assignments, to pick up where we left off and then go back and refresh what has already been reviewed. Article 6, Section 4, Subsection E was discussed, and the suggestion made was that approval of council's majority should be consistent throughout the entire charter. David Lynch explained the difference between Richmond Heights charter and that of the city of Euclid. Euclid is a strong mayor-structured charter, whereas Richmond Heights charter is not. In discussion, question, Elliot Eisenberg to Todd Hunt. In the past committee reviews, has there been as much presentation and discussion other than from the committee members as there is currently? Answer, no. Tyrone Drummer raised the issue of it being difficult for the mayor to reach his or her goal when he or she cannot get appointments through. Danielle Cadu stated that she sees the need for change, but does not want to swing the pendulum such that a future mayor will be abusive with power. Shadina Williams stated that the primary concern is to strengthen the city. The chair stated that everyone is charged to review the charter for what the charter is and focus on getting a workable charter for the city and not have an eye on individuals. Open to public comment. Councilman Linton reiterated what he previously stated during his presentation to the committee. The next meeting, April 8, 2014, will have a presentation from the finance director. Chair Drummer contacted Councilwomen Morgan and Henry by phone to invite them for their presentation. He will also place invitations in their respective boxes. He stated that he also wants to extend invitations to former mayors Ursu and Boyle. Stanley Johnson moved that the meeting be adjourned. Elliot Eisenberg second. The meeting was adjourned at 7:07 p.m. Respectfully submitted, Stephanie Douglas, interim recording secretary.
Thank you, sir. Are there any additions or corrections to minutes as read? Are there a motion that the minutes be approved as read?
I move that the minutes be approved as read. Second.
It's been moved in second. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, motion carried.
You're pretty good, I think. Glad I sit down here.
I'm practicing, Danny, I'm practicing. Today, we have the finance director, Mr. Jeff Smart, and I'm asking if you'd like to join us at the table.
Certainly.
Mr. Smart, thank you for joining us today. We're extending invitations to each of the department heads and also to each council person to just sit down with us and just give us your overview of your job structure and background, and if you see anything in the charter that's, you know, pros or cons, or
Okay.
looks like it needs to be amendment, it doesn't need to amendment, we're looking for just, you know, your voice. We
Okay.
appreciate your comments.
Thank you very much. As the Chief Fiscal Officer of the city, I am responsible for the collection, recording, deposit, and safeguard of the city's revenues, and disbursement of all the city's funds through paying of our bills, and also payroll for all city employees is in my office. That includes the benefits administration for all city employees is one of the areas that are currently in my office. I don't know if it will remain there as we change around staff, but right now it is. Also, workers' compensation is handled in our office. I am responsible for maintaining accurate accounting records, including all of the monthly bank reconciliations that are important to the city, that they're done. I prepare monthly financial reports for submission to the mayor, council, and the department heads. I'm responsible for maintaining an accurate record of all the fixed assets and the infrastructure within the city. I'm responsible for the city's insurance coverages, managing all of the city's debt, investing. Any funds that are invested by the city would be done by myself. I'm responsible for the preparation of the annual city budget and the appropriation ordinance that goes to council. I'm also required to prepare a 3-year financial plan to project annual revenues and expenditures. And I'm responsible for the preparation of the capital improvement program. I'm the purchasing agent for the city, responsible for purchasing, storing, and distributing supplies. Also responsible for advertising bids for purchases over $25,000 whenever any of that type of stuff would arise. And also disposal of any obsolete and surplus equipment would come through my office. When I was brought in here December 18th, it was with the idea that I was going to be closing out the city's year-end business making sure that everything was as it needed to be with the revenue estimates and appropriations that go to council. So that was what I was tasked with when I started. And I did that when I updated the 2013 revenue estimates with the County Budget Commission and prepared appropriation legislation to go to council to clean up any loose ends with the expenditure situation with the city, to make sure that everything was properly appropriated and was within the limits of our revenue estimates. I also dove into the bank reconciliation issue, which has been a problem here for a long time. I went back and reviewed some of the reconciliations that were done in recent history over the last few months before I came, and found enough issues that that I had to spend quite a bit of time, and I think I've got that all worked out to the point where we're reconciled to the books to the bank every month and going forward, and hopefully there won't be any additional problems dealing with bank reconciliations. I also had to make sure that the temporary appropriation was ready to go, which covered the first 3 months of this year, so that beginning with the 1st of January, we had something in place where we could operate. Everything that I'm doing right now, currently, now that I've got past the beginning of the year, I've indicated to the mayor that I will stay for a while yet. I don't know my permanent situation with the city. I am retired from the city of Chardon. I spent over 26 years there, and before that I was with the state auditor's office for 8 years. So I do have over 34 years of government experience, and I like what I'm doing here, but as I told the mayor, my wife has some health issues, and if I will stay until I can't, so, or until someone asks me to leave. Right now, everything that I'm doing in the office is kind of a work in progress, because there's a number of things. I mean, I'm compiling a list of things that need addressed as far as the finance department goes. First and foremost, I'm trying to change the way the city spends its money. And what I mean by that, from the involvement of council and the department heads in the budget preparation, to proper procedures to be followed in purchasing, and then even how my own department operates as far as processing revenues and paying bills. So there's a lot of things that I'm looking at. So some of the challenges that I've run into since coming, as I said, I was retired, and I came out of retirement to take this on. I came from City of Chardon, which was a council manager form of government, which is, of course, different than what you have here, being it's the mayor council form of government. And that was significantly different in that with the manager council form of government, the manager is hired by the council and works directly for the council and at the pleasure of council. And here, with the form of government that I was not used to, with an elected mayor, that was a little different. I found myself riding the fence, so to speak, between council on one side and the mayor on the other. So that was something that I had not had to deal with in my former positions, and to try, I'm not here to point fingers at anybody.
No, no.
please don't take anything I say the wrong way. I'm just making observations. And I think some of the issues that I've encountered here, many of them have been outlined in the audits that have been done over the years. Over, the last several audit reports are filled with findings from the state auditor's office of performance issues with the city, budgetary problems, and goes on and on. Things that hadn't been rectified for a long time. And I don't know if that's just the council that was here for those years and the way the mayor that was here operated, and things just, happened. I wasn't here, so I hate to comment on that. But all of those things that I've encountered since I came were all things that have been going on for a while. And I would really like to get some of that stuff cleaned up. And I know the mayor would. Conversations I've had with her. The audit report, had things in it that have been in the report year after year after year that haven't been corrected. So that's got to change.
Such as, if I may interrupt.
Budgetary violations are a big thing, and when I say budgetary violations, I'm talking about you make revenue estimates for the city, and those revenue estimates go to the county budget commission for their approval. And you have to, you certify your fund balances to the county along with the revenue estimates, and they send you back a certificate of estimated resources. And that certificate tells you what you can appropriate. You can't appropriate more than that. Well, there have been problems with the revenue estimates, and there have been problems with appropriations that exceeded the revenue estimates, and there's been problems with expenditures that have exceeded the appropriations. Those types of things. Transfers that move money from typically the general fund to another fund. Those have not been properly approved by council. Things like that, dealing with the budget, that are things in my estimation that, or my opinion, that just should never happen. There's a lot of things that can go on in the city that sometimes are out of your control and become issues, but that shouldn't be one of them. Sure.
So if council is not approving the transfers, who is? Or who did?
Well, some of the issues are, I think the transfers possibly weren't brought to council by the finance director, or some of just the procedural things weren't followed. And there's probably a combination of those.
So were they departmental requests, individual requests?
Well, the transfers are all something that start with the finance director. I mean, when you make a budget at the beginning of the year, many of the funds don't have sufficient revenue for those particular funds to operate by themselves. So the general fund needs to pay for some of those operating expenses in the other funds. And you do that by transferring money from the general fund to those funds. And that's all reflected in your revenue estimates that you send to the county, and it's reflected in your appropriation documents. Well, some of those numbers, they just weren't followed through on. Either they weren't, revenue wasn't shown as being a receipt into a fund when it was transferred into it, or transfers were given to council that weren't shown on the appropriation legislation, so they weren't authorized on the expenditure side. There's just a lot of things like that that have been problems. So things that shouldn't happen.
How have those problems affected our bond?
Our bond ratings are investment grade. In other words, they're not. We wouldn't be selling junk bonds, but they're on the low end of the investment grade. And there are things like the audit reports that are critical when the rating agencies are looking at your city. And if the audit reports reflect. There's a lot of issues in the audit report that reflects poorly on management, which reflects poorly on the city, and it just has a negative effect on your rating. So. Looking at future plans, I have been maintaining a list of things that I think need addressed. Many of them are not necessarily charter related, but things nonetheless that that I'm looking to address. Some of them, some of the things on my list include just implementing some new policies and procedures and retraining employees on the proper procedures for doing things. Some accounting system changes that I'd like to make, and excuse me, correcting the audit findings in the audit report, and creating a long-term financial, some long-term financial planning documents that would be necessary for some sound financial management going out into the future years.
Could I ask you a question, Mr. Smith? On these plans that you just explained to us, is that a director of finance directive that the director of finance can implement these plans, or does the director of finance have to, I know they have to work with the mayor, and what role would council play into this information that you just explained? The procedure part.
Most everything that I've mentioned would probably end up before council in some fashion. Whether it's a policy or a procedure document that would need council approval, whether it was legislation to correct some of the things that have been found to be wrong in the audit. Those types of documents, if I prepared a long-term financial planning document, long-term budgeting document, all that stuff shows up on council's desk. The only thing that I mentioned that might not be is if changing the thinking of some of the department heads and how they do things, especially relative to the purchasing functions that they're involved in. Because there's should be a set procedure for how they institute or begin the purchasing process, and it follows through to my office. And there's a lot of that isn't being followed today. By that, excuse me, by that I mean the requisitions to purchase orders have to be done in a manner that they don't buy anything until they get a purchase order back. And some of that stuff isn't happening quite the way it should now. And the city is using an awful lot of blanket purchase orders, which lets the department heads have a dollar amount, let's say $5,000 for a quarter, and they don't have to come back for purchase orders other than the blanket. They buy everything off of a blanket purchase order. And that works for a lot of small stuff, but when they try to buy the bigger ticket items that way, that isn't like what I like to see. So.
But the blankets should be signed off by you as well.
Oh, yes,
Am I
yeah,
correct?
yes, because
So-
there should still be a requisition, still be
That's
a
right.
purchase order, a blanket purchase order in place, so that that limits what they can spend for the quarter is $5,000, and even then, some of the departments aren't showing quite enough restraint in their spending practices. So.
How many department heads have that blanket order?
I think they probably all use it.
Use it. 10 of them.
Sounds
Five.
Well, there's the basic, the main departments that are police, fire, building, service, recreation, and administration. And so, all the departments use the blanket purchase
So
order.
using a blanket order each quarter, so if we multiply that times 4 times, so you're talking about excessive or extensive amount of money that's can be utilized without any, I would say, any checks and balances.
Right. There are instances where blanket purchase orders are very appropriate. If you're buying, auto parts and those type of things, relatively small ticket items that every time you need a bag of bolts, you don't want to have to fill out all the paperwork to go buy a bag of bolts, So those types of things are very appropriate for that. But there's a lot of things that get purchased when I think we really ought to be doing some more individualized requisitions and purchase orders.
So a blanket order, for instance, is $5,000. Each department head has a blanket order per quarter of $5,000. Do they or do they not have to come through you for those blanket orders?
Yes, they do.
Okay. But you should know what they're purchasing each quarter underneath those blanket orders.
Yes.
Otherwise, you're just paying bills.
Correct.
And
And
don't know what.
when they request them, and they're requesting, each department has a number of accounts, line item accounts within their budget.
Mhm.
And each of those line item accounts has its own blanket purchase order. And if they have, some of them might be $5,000 blankets, some of them might only be $1,000 blankets, depending on what the line item is. And I just want to try to rein that in a little bit more
Yeah.
than it is.
Yeah. Does each department head or subordinates have credit cards?
There are credit cards out there that probably a dozen employees have. And if I have anything to say about it, those are going to cease to exist. I don't particularly like credit card use by employees. I had credit cards in the city of Chardon that were kept in the finance department, and they were only used in basically 2 instances. When you traveled, you took a credit card because if you needed a credit card for a hotel bill or whatever else you were doing when you were traveling. That way you didn't have to front your own money to travel and pay for that kind of thing. So if you traveled, you took a credit card with you, and all the proper documentation was filled out in advance, purchase orders and all that. So you had one if you traveled, and you were given a credit card to use if there was an emergency purchase where the vendor would not take a purchase order number.
Sure.
And that comes up once in a while. But generally speaking, I didn't allow the departments to use credit cards just for everyday purchases. If we wanted to go that route, you can institute a purchasing card, system that works a little differently. But credit cards per se, I'm just not crazy about departments using.
Do the department heads, do they submit monthly expenses, business expenses? If the chief has to go out for lunch with a group or something, that goes on the credit card.
It could.
Do they submit a expense report after use every month for those expenses?
They're supposed to submit paperwork along with the receipts and whatever else they have. And that has been very lax, and that's one of the problems I have with credit card use. Is the documentation hasn't always followed its use.
Can I ask a question? It's my understanding that we don't have 12 departments, so how do we have 12 people in credit cards?
There are 2 or 3 in the police department that have them. There are 2 or 3 in the service department that have them. I'm trying to think if the fire department has more than one. Recreation, I think, has one or two, had 1 or 2. Some of these cards go back a while. And in fact, the last time they expired and the company sent us new cards, about half the cards that showed up were for employees that don't even work for us anymore.
Were they still being used?
No, they weren't being used, but they hadn't been canceled, the employees hadn't been removed. So,
Now, I have another question. In your opinion, based on the time that you've been here, would you find that every department, if purchasing is centralized and all that, do you think that every department needs to have blank purchase order?
I think, as I said, I think blanket purchase orders serve there's a valid purpose for a blanket purchase order. Because even though I'm the purchasing agent and basically what I do or what our office does, department, is just kind of like the office supplies type thing. You know, if the departments need stuff, then they can come up here and get it. The bigger things, or the things that are just for their departments, I really don't think I need to be involved in that as the purchasing agent, beyond approving the requisitions and the purchase orders when they need something that way. It's not uncommon for blanket purchase orders to be used, and it expedites the purchase in many cases. You know, if the mechanic at the service department has a truck brought in and it, you know, he needs some parts for it right away, he can run down to the auto parts store, get what he needs.
I see that. My
You know,
question
without
was every department.
delaying.
Right. My question was every department.
There are probably a few accounts in each department's budget that would be appropriate for, but not the widespread use that I'm seeing now.
Yes, David.
Jeff, the blank purchase orders, so I understand your definition of them. Each blank purchase order is connected with...
Blanket.
Blanket is connected with a specific vendor?
No,
Okay.
no, the blanket purchase orders that we're issuing have a single account, an account line item in their budget, and then they can go to multiple vendors to buy off of their blanket purchase order that pertains to that line item account, like contractual or supplies.
I have a question. You say hypothetically, like every quarter, they're allowed, let's say, $5,000, these departments?
Well, 5,000 is just a number that I,
Right.
they can be different, yes.
Okay, so let's say every quarter they get that amount of money. So the first quarter where they're given $5,000, and then the second quarter comes and they need $5,000, do they at least have to show receipts that the first $5,000 was spent?
Not necessarily, because even though they may get a $5,000 blanket for the first quarter, they may only spend $2,000 of it. The next quarter, things may be entirely different. They may end up spending $4,000 of it. You know,
But
it's
they
not
don't have
just
to
a
show
single.
receipt?
Oh, sure they do. The invoice, yes.
That's what you.
I mean, the accounting of it doesn't dictate the following quarter's amount, is what I'm trying to say.
Okay, but they still have to show receipt
Oh.
as to how it was spent?
Oh, sure, because the invoices come back in from the vendors, which we process in our office, and they're matched up to the purchase orders. And then invoices are paid and vendors, you know, get their checks. That's all tracked through our office, but the amount of the purchase order from quarter to quarter isn't necessarily based on how
Right.
much they've spent in the prior quarter.
I understand.
There's a lot of requests for blanket purchase orders that if a department in a particular line item has $10,000 to spend for the year, they might request $5,000 for the first quarter And that's the kind of stuff that I try to rein in, because if they spend 5,000 in the first quarter and then they spend 5,000 in the second quarter, they're done for the year. And if they don't have enough restraint on how they, what they're buying, so if I try to.
Have you finished your notes at this particular point?
Everything except one charter issue.
Okay. Can I ask the committee to let this gentleman finish before we ask any additional? Because I think we all have some questions, but I really want to know what this gentleman has to
Yeah,
say.
as far as the charter itself, I have one recommendation that I would like to see you consider, and that, excuse me, that deals with Article 4, Council. It's Section 9 under the powers. In particular, paragraph F. Yes.
Section 9.
See if somebody finds the call at this page.
Under the powers, section 9.
Section 9, page 9.
Correct.
Well, actually 10, because you said that. Yeah. Page 10. Yeah.
F.
Okay.
And this is a contract issue with me. That paragraph F says in the second line, and no contract shall be made on behalf of the municipality unless first authorized by council. And in my opinion, that is overly restrictive and makes for inefficiencies in how the departments operate. And examples of that are like small type contracts, like we have an agreement with True Green for treating the grass. We have an agreement with McDonald Equipment Company for generator maintenance. We have an agreement with a gentleman who's reviewing our phone bills for us to see if he can find some places to save us some money. It's that small type stuff that I think need handled on an administrative level versus council having to be involved in each of those contract discussions. I think it is just an inefficient way to operate.
Is there a dollar amount? I was just going to say, can you fix a dollar amount?
Well, I was going to give you a dollar amount, but what I think I would do would be to leave that up to council to set that dollar amount if they're so inclined to go that direction. In Chardon, we have a section in our charter that gives this authority to the manager, but if you put the mayor's name in place of the manager, I mean, it would be something like the mayor shall be the contracting officer of the municipality and shall award and execute contracts and agreements on behalf of the municipality in a manner and under the procedures adopted by the council and enacted by ordinance. So I'm just looking for something that, rather than being so restrictive in the charter, that this could be loosened up and it could be dealt with on a legislation level to set some guidelines that the mayor must follow in dealing with these types of contracts. Just so much of this stuff doesn't have to come back to council all the time.
Mr. Chair.
Yes. Yes, Tom.
Jeff and I are on the same wavelength, as you recall. That's exactly the recommendation that I had in terms of a charter change.
Okay.
Jeff and I have discussed this. I've discussed it with all previous finance directors. I found it very cumbersome, I think, also to have to draft legislation for every minor contract. And again, I think you would ask me as a committee, what should be the dollar amount? And I I didn't give you an answer to that, but I did, you had asked what other communities have. And specifically in their charter, they do have limits. I'm not sure that council will put a limit on, but perhaps. Certainly I've seen in a lot of charters, a limit for the mayor to authorize expenditure of funds on contracts.
Because anything that there would be agreements for, that the mayor could enter into, should have already gone through council's process with council looking at it in the budgetary discussions we've had. So there shouldn't be anything that the mayor would do that would be a surprise. You know? So rather than tying up council's time and costing us money with legislation being written that is, in my estimation, unnecessary, I would really like to see something put in the charter that just lets council set some guidelines by ordinance. And that way, the ordinance can be changed whenever it needs to be changed. If they find it that it's too loose or too restrictive, they can change it. You know, if they find out that the mayor is abusing the privilege, they can tighten it up. If they find out that the mayor is handling it perfectly the way she should or he should, whoever it is, then they could, you know, give some more latitude. But the way it is now, I think it's because it's in the charter, it's very restrictive.
Thank you. Is that the only charter issue you saw?
That's the only thing that I have enough dealing with since I've been here to really comment on. I would hate to get into some of the other areas that I'm really not versed in. I mean, I'm not in the fire department, I'm not in the police department, and you've heard from those gentlemen, I'm guessing already, so it's not my place to, I think, comment on some of their operations. And normally I wouldn't comment on council's operations, other than this, I think, has an effect on my operation, so.
If I may, having you list or highlight some of what you do. So what do you do after 9 o'clock in the morning?
I thought you were going to say, what do I do after 9 o'clock at night?
That's facetious, obviously. My question, I guess, without any involvement of humor, is what suggestions would you possibly give to us regarding streamlining the position so that you are not here at night? I certainly hope your wife's health is first and foremost,
Yes,
that she gets back to on her feet.
Yes, it is. Well, and in fact, I'm going to be taking a few weeks off because she's having some surgery.
Okay.
So I haven't even told council this yet. The mayor knows that I'm going to be gone.
Council knows now.
They will, you know. Some of them do.
All kidding aside, I mean, I have to say this, at the first council meeting we had, first chance I had to review the charter, I honestly got nauseous reading the responsibilities of your office. I don't know how it's possible for one person to possibly accomplish what's here, let alone what you found once you got involved in your position.
And I didn't even list that I have to deal with indigent burials. I had one of those yesterday and today I had to deal with. Indigent burials. It does here.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, there's, you know,
Where's the health department?
well, we don't have our own health department. I mean, the state of Ohio says if you have an indigent an indigent individual who dies in your community, you're responsible for paying the cost to see that they get buried. And so I've spent the last day and a half or so dealing with the family and having to find
You'd be happy to know I've already paid for all my funerals.
so, you know, so You know, that stuff just comes up, you know, there's, the things that I've listed were just the tip of the iceberg. It's not all the little stuff that crosses my desk every day.
My question again,
Um,
how can it be streamlined?
well,
How can you?
Well, some of it is if you've got an adequate staff. I mean, everything coming through, all this stuff coming through the finance department isn't an issue as long as you've got the people there to deal with it. And right now, we're down, we don't have a deputy finance director right now. That position is vacant. And things would lighten up considerably from, in my office, if there was somebody in the adjacent office that I could shove some of it to.
Is anything being done?
Yes, we're working, the mayor's working on it. It's just, there's been a number of positions and
Will be posted this Thursday,
that,
Friday.
there's been, I mean, there's been so many positions that have needed some attention that I just was waiting my turn to see that got taken care of. So there's, I wouldn't say that a lot of the things, everything that's coming across my desk are things that need to be in the administrative offices. Now that the mayor has her assistant in place, there's a lot of things that she'll be able to pick up that, you know, that had to be done by somebody else until that position was refilled. So I wouldn't say there's a place to move it to other than the administrative offices and the finance department in particular, because I don't know where else it would really fit.
Should we not have a formal purchasing department, purchasing agent?
We could, but I don't know that we're really that big.
Okay.
We, as long as the department heads are made to follow the rules and do their requisitions and wait for a purchase order to come back from the finance department before they make their purchase, and invoices from the vendors flow through and everything gets matched up, everything is perfectly accounted for, and it's not a problem until people don't do what they're supposed to do. And whether we had a purchasing agent, purchasing department or not, that probably wouldn't change. If people don't do what they're supposed to do, you're gonna have problems.
So it's a smart, the city in the past were, I guess, in the red. Did you find that the purchasing habits were continued even though the finances for the city wasn't there? I don't know if it's the general fund or it's coming out of what funds it come up with, but when the city is not in the black, how can we still have just blanket purchase orders without any accountability?
I'm probably not in a position to answer that, because all of that, I mean, I only started on the 18th of December.
Yes, I
And
understand.
all of the financial issues that you had here were not unique to Richmond Heights. I think a lot of cities, in fact, most cities were probably experiencing the same issues. 2008, 2009, 2010, just like we are individually. So all that was before my time here, so I really don't know what was done during those years to curtail the expenditures that the departments were making. So I really don't have an answer for that.
Thank you. Are there any more questions for? Good job. Okay, tonight, I want to thank you, Mrs. Rockwood, sitting down with us and been very forward with us, and we really appreciate your information.
Can't afford to have you leave.
Yes.
Well, I appreciate that, and I'm not planning on leaving. I am going to need a few weeks off. But I will be here, I told the mayor this, I says, I will be here until one of two things happens. Either my wife's health deteriorates to the point that I'm required there more than I am here, or if the political situation becomes intolerable.
Okay, makes sense.
I have one question. Is there anyone here who can follow your format as far as the things that need to be done, just in case, what, for the 2 weeks you're gonna be gone? Is someone who can follow your format, you know, so when you come back, you don't have to do a whole lot of catching up?
The staff that I've got consist of 2 part-time ladies, and they will continue to do what they've been doing, which is one of them takes care of payroll and all the benefits administration, and the other one takes care of the receivables and the payables. And those are the major things in the finance department that are done on a daily basis. And they're not going anywhere that I know of. I've got it set up so that I can remote access my computer from home and can keep up with some of the things that need done. And I've got some other things that I'm thinking about if I need to come in for a half a day here and there. So I mean, I'm not gonna be gone forever. It's not like, no different really than if I was taking a couple weeks vacation. It would help if we had an assistant finance director in place while I was gone, but that unfortunately won't be the case. So, but I think things will be okay while I'm away for, and you know, I'm hoping it's only a couple of weeks. I'm hoping she's back on her feet, but it could turn into be 3 weeks. It could turn into be 4 weeks, depending on how it goes.
Your part-time staff, are they new to the city, or they been working in your office for a length of time?
They're both relatively new. I mean, within the last 3 or 4 years, 5 years probably. I don't know exactly what their start dates were, but they're relatively short-term. But I mean, it was an issue when I first started, because with the finance director leaving and the deputy finance director leaving shortly thereafter, that left the finance department with 2 part-time individuals, period. And the one that does the payables wasn't doing them prior to that, the deputy was. So all of a sudden she became immersed in getting the payables done in addition to her other duties. And that's being handled, and things will continue to be handled, but there's room for improvement.
Good. Well, if there's no more questions for Ms. Wright, I want to thank you. Again, for attending, and really enjoyed it.
Thank you.
Thank you, sure do.
I think we should go to him.
Next week, on the 15th, we invited Ms. Starsky-Morgan. I have a tentative agreement with her to attend, and I'll be giving her a call maybe Wednesday or Thursday to confirm. I did issue letters to Councilperson Eloise Henry and Councilman Alexander. I put them in their mailbox upstairs last week. As we speak, I haven't had any response from them, so I'll try to make another contact with them. Beyond that, we have to extend an invitation to Mayor Ursi and Mayor Boyle.
Mr. Chairman?
Yes.
Can I ask what we're looking to accomplish by having the formal members?
Just to get their ideals, and they lived through this charter, so maybe they have some input that might be valuable to the citizens. So,
Considering that the prior mayor was here for 20-plus years, he went through 4 committees. I just wonder what, if anything, we're looking to accomplish in this particular area. I'm sorry, gentlemen.
That's okay,
Just an honest question.
we're extending the invitation to him as a former mayor to attend our charter review.
I'm sorry?
Being nice.
On my side or his side?
You gotta smile, you gotta smile and pass all the some gum, you gotta all have some chewing gum.
Yeah.
So I'll put some letters together to, send the invitations out, and we'll, try to see if they, accept it. So, we'll try to get in touch with, Councilperson Henry and Councilman Alexander, and because I think towards the end of this month, we'll probably have to start digging into the charter and really start
Yes.
pulling some things out. Because again, we have an August 6th deadline to turn everything into the council.
I think that we're gonna find a couple meetings, we gotta be able to knock it out.
Yes, yes, and, next week, if we have time, Danielle, we're gonna start with you on your article.
What?
We're gonna start with Article 6, Section 6 now.
Oh, that's cruel. That's
You
cruel.
were given that, we were given
Boss.
it last week, and I don't think it would be, fair to Dwayne, since he was gone for a day. So we'll pick up with Danielle. Do you mind, Danielle? I think you'll be great at it.
Oh, all right. Somebody took
Well,
some
she's probably right.
psychology.
So that's next week.
Yes, next week. Anyone, Councilman Zane, any?
No, thank you.
Okay, thank you.
No comment tonight.
Mr. Hunt? No?
You know, it's a comment from Mr. Eichmann said sometimes mayors, when they're not mayor, feel that they're freer to talk about things they have their experience than when they're in office. I saw Sam Rutigliano a few weeks ago, and he made a lot of tough decisions as coach of the Cleveland Browns. But if you get him into a corner and you ask him about Red Right 88, they'll tell you he might not have made that call. So I think sometimes the distance of time.
Actually, Newsom was one step away.
Yeah, that's right. Distance of space and time sometimes makes a significant difference in a former mayor's view of what maybe ought to be different in your charter.
Okay. Forgive my honesty, I apologize. I just-
Anything else, Ms. Gray? Okay.
Make a motion to adjourn.
Is it a motion that the meeting be adjourned? Do I have a second?
Second.
Second? Then move to second that this meeting be adjourned.
All in favor?
All in favor?
Aye.